Jack's investigation did not go unnoticed. 3 days after his conversation with Admiral Kelly, he received a formal message from High Commissioner Vukshen's office. The message requested his presence at the Galactic Safety Council's annual certification simulations. Jack had heard about these simulations. Each year, representatives from all Confederation species participated in emergency drills to maintain their safety certifications. Humans were typically excused from these events. When Jack arrived at the simulation chamber, he found Vukshen waiting. The High Commissioner was tall and thin with iridescent scales and 4 eyes that blinked independently of each other. Lieutenant Howard, Vukshen's voice was surprisingly melodic. "Thank you for coming. I understand you have been asking questions about human exemptions." Jack stood straighter. "Yes, Commissioner. I was curious about our special status." "Curiosity is valuable when properly directed," Vukshen said. "Rather than merely tell you what you wish to know, I believe it would be more instructive to show you." The Commissioner led Jack to an observation room overlooking 12 identical simulation chambers. In each chamber, a representative from a different species faced an emergency scenario. "Watch," Vukshen instructed. Jack observed as the simulations began. Each chamber presented the same crisis: the cooling system failure in a space habitat. Jack watched representatives from each species respond according to their training. The Florian methodically checked each system in sequence. The Zakites worked in perfect coordination, following their emergency manual to the letter. The Erdin carefully documented each step of their response. "They are all following proper procedures," Vukshen noted. "Their responses are correct according to Confederation safety protocols." Jack nodded. "They're doing well." "Are they?" Vukshen's 4 eyes blinked in sequence. "Observe the time." Jack looked at the countdown clock. Over 30 minutes had passed, and none of the representatives had resolved the crisis yet. "Would you like to try the simulation, Lieutenant?" Vukshen asked. Jack hesitated, then nodded. A staff member guided him to an empty simulation chamber. Inside, Jack found himself in a replica of a habitat control room. Warning lights flashed as a computerized voice announced the cooling system failure. Jack quickly assessed the situation. The main coolant pump had failed, and backup systems were offline. Temperature was rising in the habitat's core. Jack checked the emergency procedures manual, then set it aside. Instead of following the step-by-step protocols, Jack rerouted power from non-essential systems to create a temporary cooling circuit. When that wasn't enough, he manually overrode safety interlocks to access emergency water reserves, converting them into coolant. The simulation ended with a soft chime. Jack had resolved the crisis in just under 4 minutes. When he returned to the observation room, Vukshen and several council members were waiting. Their expressions were unreadable to Jack, but there was a tension in the air. "You violated 17 safety protocols," a Draxon council member said. "You bypassed interlocks designed to prevent exactly the actions you took." "But I stopped the meltdown," Jack pointed out. "Yes," Vukshen said, "in 1/8 the standard time, with technical violations, but complete success." Another council member, a floating Erdin, drifted forward. "This is precisely why the exemption exists. Humans approach problems differently." "The exemption?" Jack asked. "The human response exemption," Vukshen explained. After first contact, the Confederation studied human emergency responses extensively. "We discovered something remarkable. Humans perform better in crises when they are not bound by formal safety training." "Is that why I was asked to come today?" Jack asked. "To demonstrate this." "Partially," Vukshen admitted. "Your actions at Mining Station Delta brought renewed attention to the exemption. Some council members questioned whether it was still necessary after 50 years of human integration into the Confederation. And now they have their answer," Vukshen said. "You resolved a Level 3 emergency in 4 minutes with no preparation. The average trained representative requires 35 minutes following standard protocols." The Erdin council member pulsed with color. Not all council members appreciate this human trait. Some find it concerning, even frightening, but we cannot deny its effectiveness. Jack thought about Admiral Kelly's words. Humans were feared but valued for their ability to break rules when necessary. What happens next? Jack asked. Next, Vukshan said, you will meet with our senior human diplomat. It is time you understood the full truth about humanity's place in the Confederation. 3 months passed quickly as Jack settled into his role at the Galactic Confederation. He attended meetings, filed reports, and slowly built relationships with representatives from other worlds. Still, the mystery of the safety briefing exemption lingered in his mind. One morning, Commander Miller called Jack into her office with unusual urgency. There's been an incident at Mining Station Delta, she said, her face serious. A containment system failed. The Council is sending an inspection team, and they've requested human presence. You're going. 6 hours later, Jack found himself aboard a sleek transport vessel with 5 other representatives. A tall plant-like Florian, 2 insectoid Zakites, a floating gas-filled Erden, and a reptilian Draxon. They all wore matching safety vests with multiple pockets filled with emergency gear. Lieutenant Howard, said the Draxon named Krell, where is your emergency equipment? Jack patted his standard-issue kit bag. Just the basics. I wasn't issued the special vest. The aliens exchanged glances. The Erden's gas sac pulsed with color. Because you are human, it whispered. Most concerning. As their ship docked at Mining Station Delta, Jack noticed the damage immediately. One section of the spinning habitat ring was dark, and emergency lights flashed around sealed doors. Station Director Meera Patel, a serious-looking woman with streaks of gray in her black hair, met them at the airlock. The situation is contained for now, she explained, but we need to inspect the damage and verify our temporary fixes will hold until permanent repairs can be made. The inspection team donned breathing masks and followed Director Patel through the station. Jack noticed how the alien representatives constantly checked their safety manuals and equipment, referring to procedures they had memorized during their briefings. They reached a sealed door marked with radiation warnings. Director Patel's face grew grim. The containment field for the ore processing chamber failed. We've established a secondary field, but the monitors show it's weakening. We need to verify the radiation levels and strengthen the backup systems. The alien representatives huddled, discussing protocols and procedures. Jack heard them debating which section of their safety training applied to this scenario. Suddenly, alarms blared throughout the station. Red lights flashed as an automated voice announced, "Warning, secondary containment failing. Radiation leak imminent. All personnel evacuate Sector 7 immediately." The aliens froze, then began a practiced evacuation procedure. But Jack noticed Director Patel looking not at the exit, but at a control panel showing the failing containment field. If that field fails completely, the radiation will spread to the living quarters, she said quietly. Over 200 people. Without hesitation, Jack moved to the control panel. What options do we have? The manual override might work, but it's inside the contaminated area, Patel explained quickly. And the emergency sealing foam could reinforce the damaged sections, but someone would need to apply it directly. The Florian representative's leaves trembled. That violates Safety Protocol 34B. No personnel are to enter contaminated zones without Level 5 protection suits and Council authorization. Jack ignored him and examined the station schematics on the wall. Is there a maintenance tunnel that runs alongside the processing chamber? Director Patel nodded. Yes, but it's not radiation shielded. It doesn't need to be if I'm fast, Jack said, already gathering emergency sealing canisters from a nearby supply locker. The Zakites buzzed in alarm. This action contradicts all safety training. You must evacuate with us immediately. Jack handed his personal items to Director Patel. Guide them to safety. I'll meet you at the emergency gathering point. Before anyone could stop him, Jack entered the maintenance tunnel. The narrow passage was hot and filled with steam from damaged pipes. Following the schematics he'd memorized, he crawled to the points where the containment field generators were failing. Working quickly, Jack applied the sealing foam to reinforce the structural weak points. He could feel the heat increasing as radiation leaked through. His skin tingled unpleasantly, but he continued working methodically. When the last seal was in place, Jack hurried back through the tunnel. His clothes were soaked with sweat, and his radiation badge had turned an alarming shade of orange, but the containment field readings had stabilized. In the emergency gathering area, the alien representatives stared at Jack with a mixture of horror and amazement. Director Patel checked Jack's radiation exposure. Within acceptable emergency limits. Medical will give you the standard treatment. Admiral Kelly swirled the amber liquid in his glass. The observation lounge was nearly empty now, just the two of them surrounded by the vastness of space beyond the viewports. 50 years ago, Kelly began, I was just a lieutenant like you, assigned to the ESS Horizon for the first official meeting with the Galactic Confederation. Jack leaned forward, eager to finally hear the truth. We were so proud, Kelly continued, his eyes distant with memory. Humanity's first diplomatic mission to meet advanced alien civilizations. The Confederation sent their flagship, the Unity, to greet us. Both ships met in neutral space between Jupiter and Saturn. Kelly took a small sip of his drink. The meeting started well. Their High Commissioner came aboard with representatives from 12 species. We exchanged greetings, gifts, the usual diplomatic dance. Then we gave them a tour of our ship. What went wrong? Jack asked quietly. Engine malfunction, Kelly said. Something in our warp core destabilized. Later analysis showed it was a manufacturing defect that had gone undetected. But in that moment, all we knew was that our core was headed for catastrophic failure. Kelly's face grew serious. If it blew, it would have destroyed both ships. Our chief engineer, Linda Reyes, explained the situation to everyone. The Confederation representatives immediately consulted their emergency protocols. And, Jack prompted when Kelly paused. And they froze, Kelly said flatly. Their protocols had no procedure for this specific situation on a human vessel. While they debated the proper emergency response, Linda and her team ignored all safety measures. They manually vented plasma from the core, rewired emergency systems, and used parts from non-essential systems to create a temporary containment field. Kelly shook his head. 3 engineers suffered serious burns. Linda herself was exposed to dangerous levels of radiation, but they saved both ships. The Confederation representatives didn't help. Jack asked. They were horrified, Kelly said. Their safety training was so specific, so rigid, that they couldn't adapt to an unexpected emergency. But what truly shocked them wasn't our engine failure. It was watching humans deliberately ignore safety protocols to solve the problem. Kelly leaned back in his chair. After the emergency was over, the Confederation representatives had a private meeting. We later learned they were discussing whether humans were too dangerous to join the galactic community. Jack's eyes widened. Because we broke safety rules. Exactly, Kelly nodded. In their cultures, safety protocols are sacred. Breaking them is unthinkable. But then their ship's doctor, a Erden named Vaz, spoke up. Vaz had studied our emergency response and realized something important. What was that? Jack asked. That humans have a unique psychological ability, Kelly explained. We can selectively ignore rules when survival is at stake. Other species either freeze up, panic, or follow protocols even when those protocols won't work. But humans can improvise, take calculated risks, and break rules when necessary. Kelly finished his drink. The Confederation realized this was actually valuable. They decided humans were dangerous, yes, but also potentially the best emergency responders in the galaxy. So they exempted us from safety briefings, Jack said, understanding dawning. Because safety training actually makes humans less effective in a crisis, Kelly completed. It constrains our natural ability to improvise. The Confederation's safety protocols are designed for species that need rigid structure during emergencies. We don't. That's why everyone looked at me strangely at Mining Station Delta, Jack said. I wasn't following any protocol. Exactly, Kelly said. The Confederation created the exemption as a compromise. They recognized our value as emergency responders, but they also feared our unpredictability. So they let us join, but kept us somewhat separate. Jack sat back, processing this revelation. So it's not a diplomatic courtesy at all. Kelly smiled. Oh, but it is, Lieutenant. The courtesy of letting humans be human, even when it terrifies everyone else. In return, we occasionally save their lives by breaking all their rules. Does everyone know this story? Jack asked. The senior diplomats do, Kelly said. The rest just know humans are different. Dangerous, but sometimes necessary. Jack thought about all the nervous looks he'd received since arriving. It must be strange for them, working alongside a species they both fear and rely on. Kelly nodded. Welcome to humanity's unique role in the galaxy, Lieutenant. We're the emergency responders no one wants to need, but everyone's glad to have around when things go wrong. The next day, Jack was escorted to a secure conference room deep within the diplomatic section of Central Hub. The room was simple but elegant, with a large round table and comfortable chairs. Large windows showed the stars outside. When Jack entered, he found a woman waiting for him. She stood by the window, hands clasped behind her back. She turned as he approached. Lieutenant Howard, she said with a warm smile. I'm Representative Diane Woods, humanity's senior diplomat to the Confederation. Jack recognized her name. Woods was legendary in diplomatic circles, having served for over 20 years as Earth's voice in galactic affairs. It's an honor to meet you, Representative, Jack said. Please, sit down. Woods gestured to the table. I understand you've been asking questions about the human exemption, and causing quite a stir in the process. Jack sat across from her. I just wanted to understand why we're treated differently. A reasonable curiosity, Woods agreed. Especially after your experience at Mining Station Delta. I've read the reports of your actions there. Very impressive. I just did what seemed necessary, Jack said. Woods smiled. That's exactly the point. You did what seemed necessary without hesitation or concern for protocols. That ability is uniquely human, at least among Confederation species. So Admiral Kelly told me, Jack said, about what happened during first contact. Peter gave you the basics. Woods nodded. But there's more to the story. After the incident aboard the ESS Horizon, the Confederation conducted extensive studies of human psychology and decision-making. What they discovered both frightened and fascinated them. What did they find? Jack asked. That humans have a psychological feature no other known species possesses, Woods explained. We can selectively ignore rules and training when faced with immediate danger. Other species either freeze, panic, or follow protocols regardless of their effectiveness. Woods activated a display on the table. It showed brain scans of different species during crisis simulations. Look at these patterns, she said. When faced with life-threatening emergencies, most species show increased activity in brain regions associated with memory recall and learned responses. They rely more heavily on training and protocols when stressed. She switched to another image. Human brains do something different. We show increased activity in creative problem-solving regions. Stress actually makes us more likely to improvise and break rules if we think it will work better than following procedure. Jack studied the images, so the safety briefings would actually impair your natural crisis response. Woods completed. The Confederation's safety training is designed for species that need rigid structure during emergencies. For humans, that training creates mental barriers to our best instincts. So the exemption isn't special treatment, Jack said slowly. It's to preserve our natural abilities. Exactly, Woods nodded. The Confederation needs humans to remain human, especially during crisis. If we trained you in their safety protocols, you'd become less effective at what makes you valuable to them. Jack thought about his experiences since arriving at Central Hub. The nervous looks, the special treatment, the whispers when he walked by. They're afraid of us, he realized. Yes and no, Wood said. They recognize that humans are unpredictable and sometimes reckless by their standards, but they also understand that our approach works in situations where theirs fails. It's not fear so much as cautious respect. Is that why there are so few humans in the Confederation? Jack asked. Woods nodded. We're carefully placed where our unique abilities can be most useful. Emergency response teams, disaster management, security operations, positions where quick, adaptive thinking saves lives. And they don't want too many of us in any one place, Jack added, understanding now. That's part of it, Woods admitted. The Confederation values what we bring, but they prefer to keep our unpredictability contained. Jack sat back, processing everything. So I'm not just a diplomat. I'm here as an emergency responder. All humans in the Confederation serve dual roles, Woods said. We represent Earth, but we also provide a capability no other species can offer. The ability to break rules effectively when survival depends on it. That's a strange position to be in, Jack said. Woods smiled. Welcome to humanity's place in the galaxy, Lieutenant. We're the rule breakers who save lives. Lieutenant Jack Howard stepped off the transport shuttle and stared at the massive space station before him. The Galactic Confederation's central hub glittered like a metal and glass snowflake against the blackness of space. His heart beat faster as he adjusted his uniform. After years of training, he was finally here as humanity's third representative to join the interstellar community. An alien with blue skin and 4 arms approached him. Lieutenant Howard, I am Grell, your orientation guide. Welcome to Central Hub. Jack smiled and extended his hand before remembering that handshakes weren't universal. He awkwardly lowered it. Thank you. I'm excited to be here. Grell's large eyes blinked slowly. Please follow me. We must process your arrival documents. Jack followed Grell through gleaming hallways, filled with beings of all shapes and sizes. Some floated, some crawled, others walked on multiple legs. The air smelled like a mix of metal and something sweet he couldn't identify. They reached a large room where about 30 new arrivals from various planets sat in rows facing a large screen. A tall, insect-like alien was setting up what looked like presentation equipment. This is the safety briefing room, Grell explained. All new representatives must attend a 6-hour safety orientation before beginning their duties. Jack nodded. He'd been warned about the Confederation's love of procedures. Grell checked something on a tablet. However, you will not be attending. Jack frowned. I won't. But you just said all representatives must attend. All except humans, Grell said simply. Please come this way instead. Jack followed, confused. As they passed the briefing room, the insect-like presenter glanced their way, saw Jack, and gave what might have been a nervous twitch. I don't understand, Jack said. Why are humans exempt from safety briefings? Shouldn't I know how to operate emergency systems or evacuation procedures? Grell's 4 hands made quick gestures that Jack couldn't interpret. It is diplomatic courtesy. Your Commander Miller will explain. They continued through more hallways until they reached the human section of the station. Earth flags and familiar plants decorated the entrance. Inside, Commander Susan Miller was waiting. She was a tall woman with short gray hair and the confident posture of someone who had spent decades in military service. Lieutenant Howard, welcome aboard, she said with a warm smile. I see you've met Grell. Yes, Mom. But I'm confused about skipping the safety briefing. Isn't that important? Commander Miller exchanged a look with Grell. Thank you for escorting him, Grell. I'll take it from here. The blue alien nodded and left quickly, almost seeming relieved. Come into my office, Lieutenant, Miller said. Her office was small but comfortable, with pictures of Earth and family members on the walls. She gestured for Jack to sit down. About the safety briefings, she began. It's a bit complicated. When humans first joined the Confederation, we attended them like everyone else. But over time, they developed this exception for us. But why? Jack asked. It seems irresponsible. Miller smiled slightly. Let's just say it's a courtesy based on past experiences. The Confederation has learned that humans sometimes have different approaches to emergency situations. Different how? You'll understand better once you've been here a while, Miller said. For now, know that we have our own human-specific briefings that I'll conduct myself. They're more practical and much shorter. Jack wasn't satisfied with this answer, but he nodded respectfully. Now, Miller continued, let me show you to your quarters. Tomorrow you'll start shadowing me at council meetings. We're currently dealing with trade route disputes in the Orient sector. As they walked through the station, Jack noticed how other aliens looked at them, some with curiosity, others with what seemed like nervous respect. When they passed a group of reptilian beings, one of them whispered something that made the others move slightly away from the humans. Commander, Jack said quietly, I can't help feeling like there's something about humans that makes the others uncomfortable. Miller smiled. Perceptive. There is a story there, Howard, and you'll learn it soon enough. But first, focus on your diplomatic duties. That's why you're here. Jack nodded, but his curiosity was sparked. Whatever the reason humans could skip safety briefings, he was determined to find out. The answer, he suspected, would reveal something important about humanity's place among the stars. 6 months after his meeting with Representative Woods, Jack found himself in an unexpected position. The Galactic Confederation had formed a special committee to review emergency response protocols, and Jack had been appointed as the human representative. The committee met in a large circular room with representatives from 14 species. Jack sat between Krell, the Draxone he had met during the mining station Delta incident, and Sixtel, who had helped him uncover the truth about the human exemption. High Commissioner Vrukshin stood at the center of the room. For 50 years, we have maintained separate protocols for human and non-human responders. Recent events have demonstrated both the strengths and weaknesses of this approach. This committee will draft new guidelines that balance safety with effectiveness. Jack listened as each species presented their perspective. The Florians wanted strict adherence to botanical safety measures. The Erden insisted on extensive documentation requirements. The Zacates proposed complex coordination protocols that would require multiple approvers for any emergency action. When Jack's turn came, he stood and looked around the room. Humans understand the value of safety procedures, he began. But we also recognize that no procedure can cover every possible emergency. The Confederation needs both structure and flexibility. Jack proposed what would later become known as the Human Exception Clause. The new protocol would maintain standard safety procedures for routine operations, but would include a special provision. In genuine life-threatening emergencies, human responders would be permitted to operate with reduced procedural oversight. The debate lasted for weeks. Some representatives feared giving humans too much freedom. Others worried about legal liability. But the data was clear. In true emergencies, human improvisation saved lives. Eventually, the committee reached a compromise. The Human Exception Clause would be adopted, but with important limitations. Only certified human emergency responders could invoke the exception. They would need to document their actions after the fact, and they would participate in special training to understand when breaking protocol was truly necessary. 3 months later, Jack stood in a large training facility aboard Central Hub. Around him stood 20 beings from various species, all wearing matching red emergency response uniforms. This was the first multi-species emergency response team trained under the new protocols, and Jack had been appointed as their instructor. Today you begin a new kind of training, Jack told them. You'll learn standard procedures, but you'll also learn when those procedures might need to be set aside. The non-human trainees looked nervous. A young Florian raised a leafy appendage. But how will we know when to follow protocol and when to ignore it? Jack smiled. That's exactly what we're here to learn. It's not about ignoring all rules. It's about understanding the purpose behind each rule so you can make better decisions in a crisis. Over the following weeks, Jack led the team through dozens of simulations. The human members demonstrated their natural crisis responsibilities. The non-humans learned to recognize when protocol might be hindering rather than helping. Slowly, the team began to function as a cohesive unit, blending structure and flexibility. On the final day of training, the team faced their certification test, a complex emergency scenario that could not be resolved through standard procedures alone. Working together, humans and non-humans adapted to changing conditions, selectively applying or setting aside protocols as needed. They completed the scenario with record efficiency. At the graduation ceremony, High Commissioner Vukshin presented each team member with their emergency responder certification. When they reached the human members, Vukshin asked the traditional certification question. Responder, recite the primary safety procedure for reactor containment failure. The human responders, following the new protocol, stood tall and answered, "As needed, sir." The non-human graduates still looked slightly uncomfortable with this response, but they no longer showed fear. Instead, there was understanding and respect. After the ceremony, Jack found Admiral Kelly waiting for him. Jack shook his head. "I just helped everyone understand each other a little better." Kelly smiled. "That's what diplomacy is all about, son. And sometimes it takes breaking a few rules to build something better." As Jack looked at his graduating team, humans and aliens standing together as emergency responders, he finally understood his place in the galaxy. Humans weren't just rule breakers. They were bridge builders, showing other species that sometimes the most important safety procedure was knowing when to set the rulebook aside. After the incident at Mining Station Delta, Jack couldn't stop thinking about Krell's words. The Draxon had hinted that there was a connection between human emergency response and their exemption from safety briefings. Jack needed to know more. Back at Central Hub, Jack became something of a minor celebrity. Alien representatives would stop conversations when he entered rooms, watching him with a mixture of fear and respect. Some even changed their walking paths to avoid coming too close to him. One evening in the station's common area, Jack spotted Zixtal, a friendly Zakate data specialist he had met during his first week. Unlike the other insectoids, Zixtal seemed genuinely curious about humans rather than nervous. "Jack Howard." Zixtal's antennae twitched in greeting. "I heard about your actions at Mining Station Delta." Jack sighed. "News travels fast around here." "Very fast," Zixtal agreed. "Especially news about humans ignoring safety protocols and entering radiation zones." "I just did what needed to be done," Jack said. "But now I'm more confused than ever about why humans skip safety briefings. It doesn't make sense." Zixtal's compound eyes gleamed. "Perhaps you are asking the wrong question. Instead of why humans skip briefings, ask what happened when humans didn't skip them." Jack leaned forward. "You know something." "I know there are records," Zixtal said quietly. "Historical data from first contact between humans and the Confederation. But they are classified." "Can you access them?" Jack asked. Zixtal's antennae flattened. "Not alone. But with help from someone with human clearance, perhaps." The next day, Jack approached Olivia Garcia, an Earthborn data specialist working in the human section. He had met her during orientation and found her to be both brilliant and discreet. Classified first contact records. Olivia looked thoughtful when Jack explained his request. "I might be able to help, but we'd need to be careful. Those files are restricted for a reason." Over the next week, Jack, Olivia, and Zixtal worked together during off hours. They accessed different parts of the database from separate terminals, piecing together fragments of information. "Look at this," Olivia said one night, pointing to her screen. "It's a medical report from the first contact vessel, dated 50 years ago. It mentions unprecedented emergency response patterns among human crew members." Zixtal pulled up another file. And here is a security assessment that references concerning but effective crisis management through protocol violation. Jack found references to an incident aboard the first contact vessel, the ESS Horizon. Something had gone wrong during the initial meeting between humans and the Confederation representatives. The reports were vague, mentioning only a catastrophic system failure that had threatened both ships. "There's a visual record," Olivia said suddenly, "but it's under the highest security clearance. Can we access it?" Jack asked. Olivia shook her head. "Not without authorization from someone at the admiral level." Jack remembered something Commander Miller had mentioned. Admiral Peter Kelly was there during first contact. He's retired now, but he visits the station sometimes to consult with the council. "Is he here now?" Zixtal asked. Olivia checked the visitor logs. Yes, he arrived yesterday for the anniversary celebration of the Confederation Treaty. Jack knew this might be his only chance. "I need to talk to him." The next evening, Jack found Admiral Kelly in the station's observation lounge. The old man sat alone, staring out at the stars. His white hair and lined face showed his age, but his eyes were sharp and alert. "Lieutenant Howard," Kelly nodded when Jack approached. "I've heard about you. The hero of Mining Station Delta." "Not a hero, sir," Jack said. "Just doing my job. May I join you?" Kelly gestured to the empty seat. "What can I do for you, Lieutenant?" Jack took a deep breath. "Sir, I want to know the truth about first contact, about what happened on the ESS Horizon, and why humans are exempt from safety briefings." The Admiral's eyes narrowed. "That's classified information, Lieutenant." "I know, sir," Jack said, "but I think I have a right to understand, especially after what happened at Delta." Admiral Kelly was quiet for a long moment. Then he reached for his drink. "Have you ever wondered, Lieutenant, what happens when rules designed for one species are applied to another?" "Sir?" "Let me tell you a story," the Admiral said, his voice low, "about the day humans nearly destroyed a Confederation vessel while trying to save it.